Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today, we will be looking at Honda's iconic CBR1100XX Blackbird, or Super Blackbird, depending on where you're located. We're going to be looking at the history of the bike, some specs, and my riding impressions of that bike. This is the 6th episode in my Blast from the Past series. And in this series, we are opening the old photo album and taking a look at some of the bikes I've owned. I've owned a lot of cool bikes over the years, and I just thought it would be fun to share my riding impressions of those bikes with you. Blackbird history. In the mid-90s, Honda decided that they were going to produce the fastest bike in the world. And up until that point, Kawasaki had really ruled the roost with the fastest bikes in the world from the mid-80s all the way through the late 80s and into the 90s. They had dominated with their Ninja 1000 and then their ZX10 and then the ZX11. Honda's answer to the ZX11 was their 1997 CBR1100XX Blackbird. The Blackbird is a nod to the SR-71 Blackbird, which is the fastest production aircraft ever made. To create the fastest bike in the world, Honda created a 1,137cc, 16-valve, liquid-cooled, inline four-cylinder, and they wrapped it in an aluminum frame and then put really slick bodywork around the bike. The Blackbird was designed in a wind tunnel to give it the most aerodynamic shape that they could in order to reach top speed using less horsepower. Honda even did things like incorporating the turn signals into the rear view mirrors. They also gave it dual headlights, but they stacked the headlights, and it's kind of a unique look. It's definitely a nice looking bike. I really liked the looks of the Blackbird. The Blackbird was produced from 1997 through 2007, and along the way it actually got fuel injection Blackbird specs. The 1,137cc motor put out 137 rear-wheel horsepower. In testing, the Blackbird ran a 10.43 second quarter mile at 132.6 miles an hour. So it was a quick bike. The best top speed recording in testing was 178.5 miles an hour, and that was tested by Sport Rider back in 1997. Surprisingly, on the Blackbird, and unlike the Kawasaki ZX11, the Blackbird did not use ram air. Honda felt that the gains with the ram air were not worth the complexity of designing a ram air system for the Blackbird, and they were also confident that as it sat, the Blackbird was still the fastest production bike in existence in 1997. The Blackbird had a 6-speed transmission. It weighed in at 557 pounds wet, so it certainly wasn't a lightweight bike. Another unique feature of the Blackbird, it had the linked braking system. I've never really been sold on the idea of linked brakes, but to be honest, when you rode the Blackbird, that linked braking system was pretty invisible. You didn't really notice it. The front fork was non-adjustable. The frame on the Blackbird was an aluminum frame. It had a monoshock rear suspension on it. What was the Blackbird like to ride? When I picked up my Blackbird, I had come from a string of pretty fast bikes, and I had some other fast bikes in the garage at the time. I had recently sold my Kawasaki ZX9R, and that was a 1997 version. I had also recently had the Kawasaki GPZ1100 and the ZX10 somewhat recently, and even Suzuki's RF900R. And so when I rode the Blackbird for the first time, man, I was really expecting that thing to be a torque monster from bottom to top and really just wanting to rip my arms off. And I'll be honest, I was really disappointed the first time I rode it because the Blackbird, unlike my other bikes, it really did not make significant power until you were up above 6,000 RPM. At that RPM, it came on like it had a turbo. It really had a spike in the power band, but because the carburetors on it were so big, it didn't have enough airflow at low RPM to lift the slides. I was used to my other leader bikes making serious power starting at about 3,000 RPM. And so I would come out of a corner and I would hit the throttle and I'd be doing 3,500 RPM. I would hit that and it felt like nothing happened. And I would wait, and I would wait. And about the time I was thinking about shutting down, it was like it finally kicked in with the power. The power band on this bike was the closest to riding a bike with a big turbo that I've ever ridden. I had a hard time coming to terms with the way that it made power and the fact that it just did not have low end like I was used to. I had a difficult time going fast on back roads. Obviously, in a straight line, once you were above 6,000 RPM, this bike was just beast. Very fast, very, very smooth, electric smooth. Another thing that I realized about the Blackbird that surprised me was it had a low seat height, but it also had a short seat to foot peg distance. I'm 6'4". That kind of cramped me up that way, so my legs were kind of scrunched up, and then it was somewhat of a reach to the bars. And so when I rode it, just for my body type, it felt like somebody had put me in a trash can butt first. I know some people like to tour on their Blackbirds. I get it. They're very smooth. They're very powerful. They're good at speed. But for me, the ergonomics just didn't work. I prefer a taller bike. The first time I saw a review of the Blackbird, it was on the cover of a motorcycle magazine, and my initial thought was, wow, they have updated the ZX11. To me, it looks very much like a ZX11 styling-wise. It kind of looks like a progression of the ZX11D, a little bit sleeker. But I always thought the CBR1100XX was just a gorgeous bike. Thought it was a beautiful bike. The only thing I did to mine, it did come with a tank bra on it, and you can see that here. I never liked the way the rear of the bike looked. It looked pudgy to me. So what I did was I took a single line of silver pinstriping and I just ran it along the natural body line, and it really did seem to slim down the lines of the bike in the rear. Handling-wise, this is another area where the Blackbird surprised me. Because of the chassis geometry, because of the length of the wheelbase, I felt like I really, really had to lean the bike further than I did on other bikes to make the same corner at the same speed. And so again, I just had a hard time coming to terms with the Blackbird on tight back roads. It steered easily, it was stable handling. I just had to lean it further than I was comfortable leaning it to get around a corner at a given speed. At the time I had my Blackbird, I also had a 1990 CBR1000. When my dad saw the Blackbird in the garage, he's like, oh, I've got to try that. Please, let's go for a ride. I want to try out the Blackbird. And I said, okay, Dad, we can do that, but promise me, and I'm serious, promise me that you will not do anything stupid. And he said, no, I'll be fine. We got on the bikes, we went out on the highway, and I was on the CBR1000 in the front, and I thought, well, I'll take the CBR1000 up to about 120 miles an hour, and that's plenty fast enough for Dad. The Blackbird's going to handle that speed, no problem, he'll be fine. I just heard my dad come blasting past me, and he was in full tuck, throttle pinned, and I knew as long as he was tucked that he was in it to win it. By the time he actually set up and I saw the brake lights come on, he was just a little speck in the distance. And when I finally caught back up to him, he was shaking. He had so much adrenaline going that he was like shaking like a leaf and talking really, really fast. And he had seen 175 miles an hour indicated on the speedometer. And I'll be honest, I'm still a little cheesed because that's faster than I've been on a motorcycle. Conclusions. I have several friends that own the Blackbirds currently, and they absolutely love these bikes. These bikes have a kind of a cult classic following. They are great bikes. They are fast. They are smooth. They're a pretty bike. They kind of have street cred to them. They are also extremely well built, and I would say even overbuilt. And so if you were looking for a bike to do a turbo project on or really kind of do some work on and beef up the motor, these are a great starting place. And the motors on these things and the transmissions and really the bikes themselves, they're almost indestructible. They're a very, very reliable, very solid motorcycle. And for those reasons, I love them. For me personally, as far as an actual sport bike goes, yes, they were fast, but they didn't make power until too late in the rev range. And so to me, they were disappointing to ride. They didn't go fast where I normally wanted a sport bike to go fast, especially a liter bike. You know, this was almost 1150cc engine, and it just was underwhelming at lower RPM, really anything below 6,000 RPM. Combine that with the linked brakes, which I didn't care for, It had kind of harsh suspension in the front, and there really wasn't anything that you could do about it. Now, I've only ridden the 97 model. They may have updated that in later years and made it more adjustable, but the 97 had a non-adjustable front fork. And then finally, it was kind of an odd seating position for me. The ergonomics just didn't work for my body type, and I felt like I had to just lean it way, way over every time I went around a corner. And for that reason, I just wasn't hot on the bike. As far as a ride goes, I much preferred riding and driving my 1997 Kawasaki ZX-9R to riding the CBR1100XX. It had so much more low-end power. It was so much better handling. And for me, the ergonomics just worked a lot better as well. I know I'm probably going to get a little bit of criticism for my riding impressions here. And again, there's so many good things about the CBR1100XX. But I'm just trying to give a fair, honest review from my perspective in light of comparison with other bikes that were available at the time. Well, I would love to know what you guys think. If you own the CBR 1100XX or you've owned them in the past, feel free to share your riding impressions in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative. And until next time, enjoy the ride.